Meta.
Good afternoon, everyone online. I was just waiting for people coming to the session. Maybe we can wait one more minute too, because I see that number of participants is increasing still. I think we can start with the welcoming. Again, good afternoon to everyone online. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar on flexibility needs assessment methodology. Again, welcome to our third and final public session in the development process of the flexibility needs methodology. DSO entity and ENTSO-E have been working on for quite a while on this proposal, and today we are pleased to announce you that we submit the proposal to ACER on 16th of April. And today we are here to present the full proposal for the flexibility needs methodology that we jointly developed by DSO entity and ENTSO-E. My name is Mehtap Alper, Senior Expert Group Coordinator for Distributed Flexibility at DSO entity, and today I'm welcoming you on behalf of our joint task force with ENTSO-E. And again, thank you for your interest in our webinar. Before going through the agenda for the day, I would like to mention some housekeeping rules. We will be recording today's session. Both the recording and the presentation slides will be available on the FNA public consultation website, which you can access using the QR code you can see on the slide. To ensure a smooth experience for everyone, we kindly ask that you keep your microphones muted throughout the session. There will be a dedicated Q&A session following the presentations, and you are welcome to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A section. And if you have any further questions or need for additional information after the session, please don't hesitate to reach out us. Our contact details are also available in the screen and in the slides that we will be sharing with you. We have covered a lot of ground in today's agenda, starting from the background and process and progressing through the whole scope of the methodology. Co-chairs of the DSO entity and ENTSO-E Joint Task Force drafting team, Hubert Dupin and Mario Cicini, will guide us through the full methodology sections today. Overview of the methodology and scope, roles and responsibilities, national implementation, data and assessments, system flexibility needs, DSO flexibility needs, fine-tuning of network and system needs, guiding criteria, market barriers and contribution of digitalization. And we will finalize with the concluding remarks and will give the floor to you for your questions. Looking at the background of this flexibility needs assessment process, this was introduced last year in July as part of the electricity market design reform. And FNA methodology or this process bring both a new responsibility for system operators, and at the same time, this is a valuable opportunity to support the energy transition as well. It provides a national outlook on necessary flexibility resources for secure and efficient operation of the future electricity system. And it's a multi-step process involving policymakers, system operators, and regulators. FNA brings a dual significance both to system operators and policymakers. It enables member states to establish non-fossil flexibility targets, which can also be potentially lead to the implementation of support schemes for non-fossil flexibility resources at national level. As DSO entity and ENTSO-E, we started the first step of the process, and we have yet completed the drafting process for the proposal of the methodology. Now the ball is on ACER's court. Acer will have 3 months in total to review, amend, and approve this methodology. Then it will be the national implementation period when member states will take action, and it will cover the assessment of the needs by implementing the methodology, which will be approved by Acer, by system operators, and then providing the data and assessments to the national regulatory authorities or designated authorities at national level. Then the designated entities or regulators will develop the national reports for flexibility needs assessment. At national level also, the timeline is quite tight. It is 12 months in total. And by July 2026, the national reports on flexibility needs will be published and also will be sent to Commission and Acer. And within the first year of receipt of the reports from member states, Acer also will carry out an EU-wide assessment and issue a report analyzing national reports and providing recommendations on issues of cross-border relevance regarding the findings, and also including recommendations on removing barriers to the entry of non-fossil flexibility resources. And when we go into a bit more detail in the scope of the methodology is as we mentioned, first deliverable of the process. The data and assessments will synthesize the needs and perspective of all distribution system operators and all transmission system operators in Europe. It will provide insight to policymakers and stakeholders to make flexibility resources available in a timely and cost-efficient manner to improve the efficiency in operation and development of the system and integration of renewables. Methodology streamlines a framework at national level for system operators, and over the next 5 to 10 years. And different actors have different roles on evaluation of different parameters. So basically 5 different issues regarding the needs will be assessed and evaluated by system operators, national entities, evaluation of flexibility needs at seasonal, daily, hourly basis, evaluation of the potential of non-fossil flexibility resources, evaluation of the barriers for the flexibility in the market, contribution of digitalization, and taking also into account the sources of flexibility that are expected to be available in other member states. I'm leaving the content-related presentation here, and our chairs will be providing a very comprehensive overview on this. And looking back to the process that we have carried out so far, really this methodology results from a collective and intensive 9-month period by a team of highly committed distribution system operator and transmission system operator experts. Throughout this intensive work and discussions, we made it a priority to maintain openness and transparency. We really dedicated a significant amount of time to engage with the key stakeholders from the sector as well as the public. The process displayed on the screen reflects the journey we have undertaken in close collaboration with the Commission, Acer, and other 11 key stakeholders that we have identified, and also through the public interaction. And also I would like to take the opportunity to say thanks to all stakeholders who provided feedback and supported this process. We have made every effort to consider and integrate all relevant and necessary inputs. And as DSO entity and ENTSO-E, we believe that we have taken an important step to ensure that this methodology is timely and on the right track as well. And also having a quick look at the timeline of the process. Throughout the proposal development, we met with stakeholder group 4 times. These meetings provided valuable input from various stakeholders, which helped us to refine the methodology. Then just after these sessions, we also opened a 4-week of public consultation. Both before and after this period, we organized 2 additional webinars, and this is the 3rd one. In our previous webinar, we also shared with you how we integrated the feedback received during the public consultation into the proposal and how we evaluated it. And at the end of the process, on April 16, we officially submitted the final proposal and the public consultation feedback responses to Acer. You can also access the public consultation page with the QR code you can see on the screen. And here you will also find the responses to the public consultation. Also in the slide, the links are available. And now the Acer process is ongoing and it will continue until the July 16. And again, we will be in close coordination with Acer during this period. The approval of the methodology and the start of the implementation of this methodology is expected on July 17th. Now I would like to hand over the floor to the co-chairs of the drafting team to present further details. First, I would like to give the floor to Hubert Duffin, who is the chair of drafting committee on behalf of DSO entity. Floor is yours, Hubert.
Hello, everyone. I am Hubert Dupin, indeed. I work at Enedis, French DSO, and I had the pleasure and the honor to co-chair the drafting team with Mario Sizini from Terna. So yes, as Mehtap said, we had a difficult task, but yet I think we now have a comprehensive proposal to cover the scope of the methodology. Maybe if you can show the next slide, please. Yes. Indeed, it is important for DSOs and TSOs to draft this methodology because the flexibility needs assessment is a very important part of our electrical system and its future. It addresses, this methodology addresses both network needs and system needs. There are many studies existing out there, but yes, this study will make an additional contribution. And indeed, it is intended to provide information to policymakers in the definition for flexibility resources. Why is it important for us? First, indeed, that's the purpose. This methodology is not an engineering report. It is to provide data and analysis to get and to enable to get all the flexibility we need. It is important to say that this methodology ensures that we keep technological neutrality. We do not favor any technology over the other. We just provide what is the need, and we consider those needs in a cost efficiency basis. We use flexibility because it's part of the electricity system to solve congestion on the network or help system issues, but economy is really out there a driver. It provides a high-level analysis of policies. Why is it that we have so much flexibility need? We have the network development plans that assess how much flexibility is there, but also we believe that through this methodology, we can provide some feedback to policymakers. This methodology will induce such and such flexibility mechanism. In particular, as you know, we connect a lot of renewables. In many countries, there are some issues on different voltage connection, low voltage, medium voltage, high voltage. With such incentives as they are, or as they will be, or as they plan, this is how much flexibility there will be. In other words, there are some issues of making all this renewable accessible on the network. How much is it? That's also one of the purpose of this methodology. We worked together to define this methodology, and we will work together with TSOs to provide data and analysis. And I think also that's a great achievement of this methodology is to provide a common framework to define data and analysis. For DSOs, this framework is important. There are many DSOs in many countries, but it will somehow provide a unified vision of all DSOs of our future. DSOs will each make their network development plan, and this methodology is somehow to zoom out and gives a big picture to stakeholders and policymakers. While processing and designing and drafting this methodology, we ensure that this methodology can be actually performed in each country. And as you know, in many countries and in each country, DSOs vary a lot in terms of sizes. They vary a lot in terms of context. Some operate rural, some operate urban areas. For example, the geography of the countries are a bit different. Some countries are more dense than others. The voltage level of operation is different. Some DSOs only operate low voltage, some low voltage and medium voltage, and some medium, low, and high voltage. And yet, this methodology has to cover all these perspectives. DSOs also have different planning methods because indeed we plan the network that is meant to be put in operations. So there is a symbiosis between planning methods and operations, just to put that perspective in. And also we consider the availability of data in some countries. There are DNDPs, in some there are DNDPs and other methods and other data and analysis. And this methodology should make the best use of available data. This methodology also supplements many system studies that are also performed by TSOs on adequacy, European Resource Adequacy Assessment, the National Resource Adequacy Assessments. And yes, this methodology should not somehow replace those results, but supplement those results. So there is an issue of complementarity and also consistency. Of course, we took a lot of importance of ensuring that these data and analysis are consistent in the terms of scenarios and data. Consistency was really key of our goal. So at the end of the day, what do we have? We have network needs, and as you know, a congestion occurs somewhere on a given location of the network and at some time. And when we plan our network, we expect that there will be some congestion at some point because we expect producers or consumers will connect at some point. We don't know when they apply. There is some kind of statistical forecast there. So the actual congestion will arise eventually at some point, somewhere and at some time. So there is an issue of network needs, and that's what we put in this methodology. However, system needs, wherever you are connected on the 50 Hertz, you have an influence of the system in any country, and in one country you also have cross-border issues. And likewise, as soon as you're connected on the 50 Hertz, you have an effect on the 50 Hertz. So the the system needs can somehow be fulfilled anywhere on the system on a copper plate. So on the one hand, system needs are copper plate issues supplemented, and the methodology enables to fine-tune the system with network needs, which are locational and it may impact the system needs. So that's the task we had to do. Maybe next slide, Meta.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this methodology, as you have read, maybe we can synthesize this in 4 parts. There is a set of articles which concern general issues such as, of course, the governance, because how we're going to operate these methods in the countries. There are DSOs, TSOs, they have to do, but how will they make it? Of course, what's the scope of the methodology and definitions. Second part is on system needs. Yes, what are the system needs? And Mario will get in a lot of details into it. There are also network needs. Network needs is a congestion for any network operators. So there are network needs for distribution system operator and network need for transmission system operators. That's need. And also we may have some issues as they are foreseen in the network code demand response, such as grid prequalification and temporal limits, which may affect the ability of resources to cover the needs. There are some resources that are not grid prequalified, or whether there are some issues of temporal limits, those flexible resources cannot cover the needs at that location. I mean, those resources at this location cannot help, and they cannot cover the need at such time. So we will somehow use this non-copper plate reality or projection to fine-tune system needs. And finally, indeed, this methodology was to provide guiding criteria how to assess the capability of flexible resources to cover the needs. So we have inserted some provisions how to describe the guiding criteria. And then finally, there is a bit of general provisions such as derogation, amendments, and the last part, which is some recommendations on how to assess market barriers and contribution of digitization, because the national report shall not only have some quantitative data on system needs and network needs, but also shall provide some information on market barriers and contribution of digitization. Okay, 4 parts in this methodology. Next slide. Meta. So indeed, you have here the definitions of network flexibility needs and system flexibility needs. Those definitions are inspired by the definition of flexibility in the package of the electricity market reform. So we tailored it for network flexibility needs. They are intended to prevent or solve congestion or voltage issue by active power. And each network operator assesses their need for their grid. And system needs, it's to adjust, it's a flexibility needed to adjust to the variability of generation and consumption. So they take different forms, and Mario will go over it. And then we made a lot of definitions, and we consider what is important: upward flexibility needs, which is basically the needs you put when you need to put more energy in the system, so it can be more generation or less demand. And likewise, we also assess downward flexibility needs. If you have too much generation coming on the system or not enough demand, then what are the needs to cope with those issues? So basically, yes, there is a lot of part on the definitions. We fine-tuned this with also the input we got from the stakeholders. And yes, if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, now what are the roles and responsibilities? Yes, no, not yet, yes. There are 2 articles that define the roles and responsibility at national law. What is it to be done? July 17th this year, in a few months, we expect ACER to approve the methodology, and then there is a start of the sprint. Of course, by then, the national entity, the designated entity that shall adopt the report should be designated by member state. Within the first 3 months, DSOs and TSOs have to agree on many things. First, who does what when? So there are many DSOs in a country. Sometimes there are several TSOs in a country. What is the role of each one in providing data and analysis? It is likely that when there are many DSOs in a country, they probably organize so that one DSO provides the data for several DSOs, but in many, on a general perspective, DSOs can delegate their task to another DSO, an association of DSOs, a transmission system operator, or some other third party. So basically, who does what when? Then this methodology relies for distribution system operators mainly on data from the distribution network development plan. But some DSOs do not have network development plan, and in some countries there are also some valuable additional studies in addition to the NDP. And those studies can provide a lot of information for the purpose of this methodology. So yes, we have to justify the need of such data so that we can enable the process of the methodology. We also need to align at national level on the common target years. On which year are we going to provide our needs? So that's ensuring consistency. We also need to agree on the granularity of data. What is the temporal granularity? We'll go over it in the examples later on. Is it one sole data for the year, or do we split data per season or some other type of time granularity? There is also the spatial granularity. Do we have one data for the nation, or do we split it, for example, by region? and also for the voltage level. Do we provide data for low voltage, medium voltage, medium high voltage, or whatever? We can also provide and decide to provide data in addition to those minimum requirements, because we think that it is valuable information for policymakers. So again, we need to align on what kind of additional data we would provide. And likewise, we need to agree on the overall timeline. Who does what when? That's the when. There is an organization. So in the first 3 months, we need to decide this. On the first month, the designated entity, we expect the designated entity to give the full scope of data analysis to DSOs and TSOs. If there is a minimum requirement in this methodology, the regulation provides that the designated entity may require a data analysis in addition to those minimum requirements. Yes, to have an efficient process, they need to give their expectations soon enough in the methodology. And of course, it needs to be justified and proportionate so that we have an efficient process. Then 10 months after the approval, DSOs and TSOs need to send their data and analysis to the designated entity, and then the designated entity has 2 months, so that is until mid-July 26th, to consolidate this data and analysis and adopt the national report. And of course, if the national entity seeks the input of DSOs and TSOs, and we believe I think it will be useful and ensure a better report. We advise that this national entity associate DSOs and TSOs that provided data and analysis to the drafting of the final report to ensure that their data and analysis are correctly interpreted or consolidated in the final report. So basically, yes, as you see, it is a very challenging sprint. We need to organize in the first 3 months. By 4 months, month 4, we need to have the full scope. That leaves 6 months to provide data and analysis, and then that leaves 2 months for the national entity. So, we were challenged on this timing. I think it's the next slide. And yes, that's an important issue. The overall timeline in the public consultation, we had 2 conflicting expectations. The people actually who did or who are supposed to do the computation said, yes, it is a very challenging timeline. Think in countries where there are several hundred DSOs, even in some countries where there are less DSOs, it's still a challenging timeline to provide all these additional data and analysis. And to coordinate and provide, that's very challenging. And of course, at the end of the day, there is some people that say, yes, but that does not leave too much time for the national entity to compile. You also need to look at the schedule. The methods will be approved in the middle of July. So all this organization and process should be done in the middle of summer, when I believe most of us will be on vacations. So indeed, if we shorten the time, it's just to say, well, expect everyone to be on vacation and organize on such difficult issues. So even though, it's by month 3 or month 4, you have to deduct 2 months of vacations. So it leaves, in fact, very little time to organize and adjust. And yes, it is challenging for everyone. It's just like a team. Everyone has to do its best so that we fit the goal. This methodology is indeed set as upper bound before month 3, before month 4, before month 10. I think that everyone agrees that if we can do it better and faster, we'll do it. But shortening it was very challenging. And yes, we got a mixed feeling, and indeed, I think we drafted the best compromise on that matter. You also have to acknowledge that in the regulation, there is no timeline for the regulator to send the data to the ENTSO. So by month 12, the national entity and the regulator has to approve the report, but the rest is, I would say, silent. We did not foresee any public consultation in the process because, as you see, for a decent public consultation, you need several weeks or months. And in this challenging time frame, it is just plain impossible to allow for public consultation. So, and most of the data is also consolidated from material which undergoes public consultation, network development plan, and TYNDP, and also there are some interactions for the national adequacy assessments. So that's basically the overall framework for the national implementation. Mario, I hand it to you.
Thank you, Hubert. Hello, everyone. I'm Mario Sissini, working at Terna, today representing ENTSO-E. I'm very pleased to have co-chaired this work together with Hubert and the team. So let's go a bit more into the details of the methodology. I hope you had the chance to read it, and many articles, many also complex steps to be implemented. So here the scope is really to provide an overview of what is the methodology and how the TSOs and DSOs will implement it during the national implementation phase. And you see here, basically, there is the list of input and a bit the output with all the possible interactions between them. Because an important element that was already mentioned, this is a joint methodology between EU DSO entity and ENTSO-E, not only because it was developed together, but also because there are interactions between the various type of needs. Let's start with the input first. You see that TSOs and DSOs will run the assessment or different type of needs based on some input. Specifically, the TSOs will take as an input the set of adequacy studies, in particular the European Resource Adequacy Assessment, the HERA, or the national assessments. And I'll go a bit more in detail into this in a few seconds, and a set of other sources which are needed to carry out the analysis. Well, on the contrary, the DSOs will mostly base their assessment for the distribution network flexibility needs on their distribution network development plans and other national studies available at national level. Plus, to finalize and implement the methodology, there's a number of additional information that we get from other resources, other studies at national level. Then these inputs are used to quantify, first of all, the system needs. You see the big chunk in the middle of the chart, which is the needs that you see from the system perspective. So copper plate, Hubert was anticipating this. Basically, they're representing needs that can be solved by resources which are located anywhere in the system, and that you see are related to RES integration, ramping needs, and short-term flexibility needs. We'll describe them a bit more in detail in a second, but you see that next to this, there is also transmission network flexibility needs and distribution network flexibility needs, which are needs that are associated specifically to the network. So they occur in some specific areas of the network and can be solved through resources that are located close to where the problem has occurred. You see that we are analyzing this transmission, distribution, and also system needs individually, but there are also arrows between them, because you see that some of the arrows coming from the distribution network flexibility needs and transmission network flexibility needs are then input again to the system needs, with what we called in an article a fine-tuning of system needs. So you'll see later in the presentation, and we'll explain why we have introduced this concept of fine-tuning, because of course it's important that we quantify the needs individually, but we also need to avoid any overlaps within the needs or double counting of the resources. So we introduce a fine-tuning to be able to basically take into account the whole perspective of the needs from all different angles and quantify this for the whole electricity system. And then finally, you see that all the arrows are going into this guiding criteria. Guiding criteria are basically a set of additional information related to the needs that we quantified that should provide the policymaker with informed data and other information to take informed decision on the resources that can best cover the various needs that we quantify. So I think you can go to the next slide. Method. A bit more in detail into this concept of interactions between ERA and flexibility needs assessment, or adequacy and flexibility needs assessment. You notice in the previous slide that especially for the system need, there is this set of input which is coming from adequacy studies. Now, if you had a look at the methodology, we write in the methodology that to quantify this type of flexibility needs, we can use as input either the ERA or the national adequacy assessment. And we can do this through a processing of these results of assessment or through a separate economic dispatch. Now, we need to give a bit of clarity on this, because otherwise it seems that we are using different studies or different inputs to provide the outputs. It's not the case, because basically the choice that is given to the TSOs to carry out the study is not on the type of data or on the source of input, but basically on the type of study which is used as a reference. Because in some cases, the TSOs could use the ERA, which is the Pan-European Adequacy Assessment, as a starting point, or the national assessment whenever they deem more relevant, which is based on the same scenario. So basically, it's sharing the same set of input and the same methodologies, so it can be considered as consistent. And when it opts, on the contrary, for a separate economic dispatch, it's again starting from the same set of input, but running a separate economic dispatch simulation with respect to the ones carried out in the ERA or in the national adequacy assessment, because it's providing more efficiency in the modeling of the flexibility needs, as we'll see in a second. But this is to say that basically we are starting, in this case, from a consistent and unique set and format of input, which is either the one of the adequacy study which are published and then are, of course, resulting in some output, which are then input to the flexibility needs assessment, or it's the input to the studies, which is used for a separate economic dispatch. But it's again providing a consistent and unique set of or format of output information. So that being said, I think we can go a bit more in detail into the system need, which is the first set of needs that we quantify. I think you can go to the next slide, which is providing an overview, and I'll try to provide a bit let's say, a high-level view of the three types of system needs that we are addressing in the flexibility needs assessment. You'll see that the methodology in the various articles provide basically the different steps that the TSOs will have to consider to implement the methodology. But here is basically provide you with an idea of what is the objective behind these needs, why we are quantifying these needs, and what is the approach that we have defined into the methodology and that we will implement. First type is very important, is the RES integration needs. Why is that important? Especially because we have this provision about consistency and complementarity with respect to the adequacy. RES integration is something which is not the objective of adequacy studies. Adequacy is looking at shortage in our capability to meet the demand. But if there is a situation of oversupply, is not really checking if we are meeting any specific RES integration target or not. In the flexibility needs assessment, we are focusing exactly on this, especially in this Article 9, RES integration needs. With this concept, we check if the system that we take as reference, which is our reference condition for the target year that we are analyzing, for example, 2030, for the scenario that we are analyzing, and there is a minimum requirement to analyze at least one scenario consistent with the ERA ones and aligned with the policy targets, with the policy scenarios that are in the national energy and climate plans. So we check with respect to this reference condition if, with the resources which are expected to be available for the target horizon, for the target year, we are capable of meeting our RES share target. RES share target is basically the target of the integration of the renewable into the electricity demand, which is normally set in national energy and climate plans, or it's available at national level. Each member state is defining or has a general target for RES integration because there is an European one that all the member states together needs to comply with. So we check if we meet this target with the resources we expect to have by the certain target year that we are analyzing. And if it's not the case, basically what we do is we introduce and quantify additional flexibility that is used to then arrive to this achievement, arrive to this RES integration target. So first there is a characterization, let's say, of the RES curtailment, because we have the opportunity to characterize the excess of generation that we are forced to curtail in different time frames, the hourly, the daily, the weekly, the monthly, the seasonal. I mean, there's a minimum set, but potentially you can consider different time frames for quantifying and characterizing your risk curtailment. And then we introduce in a very technology neutral way technologies that can allow the achievement that can allow to achieve the REST integration target, while at the same time minimizing these daily, weekly, and seasonal needs. So this is an important element because there was a challenge a bit between the need to be actionable, let's say, in terms of result, provide something that was useful to policymaker to take decision on demand-side response, storage, and other flexibility means, and on the opposite side, to also keep a certain technology neutrality, because we wanted to focus on the needs, not on the resources. So we introduced this concept of modeling different technologies, considering different time frames and different technical characteristics and features, and see what were the contribution of these technologies to reducing the risk curtailment. And you'll see an example in the guiding criteria about this. We can move to the next slide, which is a second type of system need, ramping needs. Here we are focusing on a different thing. So basically we are analyzing the variation of the residual load. No, it's the previous one. Ramping needs is correct. Yes, perfect. So we are analyzing the variation of the residual load between 1 hour and the other, considering, of course, the number of climatic years and a different time horizon of the assessment. And we are checking basically the capability of the system to meet this variation of the residual load. This is directly coming, the residual load, from time series, which are output of our ERA or national adequacy studies. But with respect to the adequacy studies, we are investigating a bit more what is the technical capabilities of flexible resources to provide ramp up and ramp down capability. So basically, this is something that the ERA or the national adequacy studies are not doing. So we are complementing in this sense the ERA studies. So we are not only consistent with the ERA and adequacy, but also complementing it, because we are basically checking if, considering the technical constraints of this generation and flexible units, we are capable of meeting this variation of the residual load between 1 hour and the other in perfect forecast condition, or if we are not. If we are not, basically there is a gap, and this represents a flexibility need. And then if you go to the next slide, it's continuing a bit the same logic that I was mentioning for the ramping needs, but passing from what is a perfect forecast into what is a forecast error. So getting closer to real time, we also need to check if we are capable of meeting not only the variation from 1 hour to the other of the residual load, but also some extra variation, basically, that could come from an error in the forecast of generation and demand. So getting closer to the real time, between day ahead and real time, and checking again if, considering the results of the market dispatch simulation, considering the residual availability of flexibility, basically we are capable of meeting this extra variation or not. The example that I showed here are in the upward direction, basically, but of course we also analyzed the other direction, so the downward direction. And for this, I can stop for the moment for system needs and leave the floor to the distribution network needs. Sorry, first the transmission network needs, yes, and then to Hubert again for the distribution network needs, because we also focus not only at the system level for the, let's say, the whole system, but also from the TSO perspective at the transmission network needs. In this case, focusing on the two different directions, the downward transmission network needs and the upward transmission network needs. For the downward, you'll see in a second that we quantify basically what is the additional risk curtailment or generation curtailment that is due to congestion or constraints at the transmission network. So something that we are not capable of observing if we just analyze the system from a copper plate perspective at the system level. So we check what is extra, what we cannot see from our system needs perspective from the market dispatch simulation. And you'll see later in the presentation that we use this information to fine-tune our REST integration needs. And then the upward transmission network needs, which is also something that we observe only if we look at the network. We are not able to see this at the system level, and it's resulting, on the contrary, in energy not delivered because there are some transmission network constraints. And in this case, we quantify this optionally for the TSOs whenever is basically relevant and is also there is availability of data, and is then resulting in some guiding criteria. Floor is yours, Hubert, to continue with the distribution network needs.
Thank you, Mario. On DSO side, most studies will be done based on the network development plan. The network development plan was introduced by the Clean Energy Package in 2019. It will be further ruled in Network Code Demand Response, but it is basically where distribution system operators provide an outlook of the network. And yes, that's where they provide an outlook of the reinforcements, but that's also where they will provide an outlook on the flexibility. That is also how you optimize your reinforcement with flexibility. It is the main document for DSOs, and it has a lot of good properties for performing this methodology and also giving input to stakeholders. First, it describes the scenarios. What are the scenarios that we will use? And those scenarios are consistent with the National Energy Climate Plan, and they use the same targets as TSO do. So basically, by design, the network development plan are consistent with the source of data and the scenarios that TSO are using for the network development plan and the system needs. Of course, the network development plan provides for planning methods. How is it that you end up with so much flexibility needs? So that's a very good basis, and it is an even better basis because it is consulted with stakeholders and the NRA. So in other words, it provides some kind of a collective vision drafted by DSOs, but it is including all stakeholders. What is the outlook of the network development plan? And yes, the NDP have to provide on a mandatory basis the data about flexibility needs. That's a solid basis. But what if there is no DNDP? DNDP is only mandatory for distribution system operators above 100,000 customers. What if, and is not yet implemented in any countries? Yet, this methodology has to be performed in a few months, and it shall also represent the data and analysis of all DSOs, whether they do or they do not DNDP yet. In any case, this methodology says whatever you use has to have the same quality criteria as network development plan. You must be clear on scenarios and assumptions and have the same criteria of consistency than network development plan. You also need to be clear on what are the criteria you use to define your flexibility needs. And of course, you need to define how much flexibility you have. In addition to this, there are some studies provided in other countries. Yes, I can give an example in France. We do work with RTE, we do work with manufacturers of equipments, we do work with building operators, yes, to study things around it. We sometimes perform some studies for network tariff settings. All these studies provide valuable information, and this flexibility needs assessment is to make the best outlook. So whatever data is good and can help provide good information for policymakers should be used. So basically, but it has to be used if it is consistent with the same quality or properties as the network development plan. The next part is what is it exactly? Following slide, please. So the next slide is what is it that we provide in terms of data analysis? Yes, we will provide some tabulated data, which I will give examples later on. We do provide, in addition, the reason why we need flexibility. So indeed, it is intended to provide a bit of feedback, not only in terms of CapEx, which is probably also the role of network development plan. But in terms of flexibility needs, if we have incentives to connect a lot of low voltage PV, and it creates a lot of low voltage congestion, this is how much energy will not be produced. Maybe we can say, well, if the incentives were to connect in medium voltage or high voltage, we would install as much capacity, but generate less curtailment or less flexibility needs. So indeed, it is to provide a bit of feedback to policymakers on the incentives to connect assets, can be storage, can be producers, can be consumers on certain part of the country, certain part of the distribution grid in terms of location or voltage level. We will also provide, of course, traceability of the data. How do we end up with this data? What are the sources? What are the methods? What are the scenarios? And also, as Mario said, we will provide data enabling to fine-tune system needs. And also, we will provide the guiding criteria of the resources to cover our needs. Which resource can cover needs? So 5 types of data analysis. Now, let's jump to real examples, examples of data that we can provide. The minimum data set, it is an illustrative table, but the minimum data set would look like it. What do you have? First, as you can see, we will provide needs upwards or downwards. We will provide it per each target year, this table. So that's why in the first 3 months, we need to agree on the target years. Then we can make it a bit finer. We can define a year in time block. We can give the data over the entire time block. Okay, downward needs. That if we have too much injection, maybe we can say, okay, this is how much need we need to curtail over the country. But if we have, for example, needs that comes from too much demand, it's probably linked to winter. So we will not say we need over the whole year, but we need probably during winter, October to March. Okay, that could be an example. The spatial granularity, the minimum requirement is the bidding zone and the country. And then, as you see, we will detail the needs by voltage level, medium voltage or high voltage. And then we provide 2 types of value. What is the total energy that we need to activate in terms of flexibility over this period, over this spatial granularity per time block? And then we end up with a value in megawatt hour. And then there is how much installed flexibility needs to be installed on the network somewhere to cover our needs. So we will give a sum of maximum power. It is not the synchronous activation of power, because when we solve congestion, we solve a congestion at a specific location. So if I have 10 megawatt of need, say in the winter in an area, and 10 megawatt of need in summer in another location, obviously I will at each time only use 10 megawatt, but overall I'll need 10 plus 10 megawatt of resources installed somewhere in the country. So the value that we provide in megawatt is the installed flexibility resources somewhere on the country. So that's the minimum data set. Now we can provide also a finer data set, which is the next slide. We can be a bit finer on the time block. Maybe we have a region which is mainly photovoltaic, which means that the downward needs will probably only occur during summertime at daytime, which is what we say, for example, April, October, on day throughout the days and between noon and 5 p.m. And likewise, we split it. And also, we can also provide the reasoning. Why do we need such flexibility needs? And that is also for policymakers, but that is also some valuable information for system operators, transmission system operator, to fine-tune system needs. And yes, if you look at the upward flexibility needs, we can say, yes, we have some issues in wintertime throughout the week, from Monday through Friday from 7 p.m. to 8 a.m. and on Saturday and Sunday throughout the day. It can be some different time blocks. And as you see, in the first 3 or 3 months of the methodology, we need to define at national level a coordinated way of slicing the year in time blocks and slicing the countries in according to the spatial granularity, and making sure that however the diversities of DSOs, whatever the country or the part of the country they operate, they are able, at the end of the day, we are able, DSOs, at the end of the day, to provide consolidated data for this year, this time block, this spatial granularity. So it's a lot of work. And basically, that's an example of table 2 for our needs. There is a third example, which is only used for representative days. At some point, when we activate resources, there is less resources coming up to the system. If we curtail generation, then for congestion purposes, then obviously there is less production coming up to the system. Maybe it's already taken into account through the market because not everyone, there will not be enough consumption to absorb all this capacity. But if, so in other words, congestion will not affect system needs. Mario will detail that later on. But what occurs on a typical day? I gave the total energy over a season. Let's say over a season, that was table 2 just before. But what occurs on a single day within that season, a representative day? And then maybe it's we again say what is the maximum installed capacity, maximum power, and what is the energy during that representative day. So as you see, a representative day can be a repetitive situation within a time block, or it can be an extreme cases, because we also plan our network in extreme cases. Those are rare events, but we do need to plan the network and the system for those extreme cases. So representative days allow to fine-tune the yearly accumulated data on what would occur on a specific days. So those are the type of data and analysis of at least the type of data that DSOs will provide. Now I hand it over to Mario.
Thanks, Hubert. I'll try to speed up, also because I see that there's a few questions that we'll have to reply to. So fine-tuning, I anticipated this. What's the problem in here? That if we quantify system need and transmission and distribution network needs individually, we cannot simply add them up to quantify the total needs flexibility of the system. Why so? Because basically, from a copper plate perspective, from a system perspective, we are not capable to see everything, so we would be underestimating our needs. On the contrary, if we introduce some resources to cover our local flexibility needs, so the transmission and distribution flexibility needs, we solve our local constraints, but at the same time, these resources could contribute to also mitigating our system needs. So we would be basically double counting some needs or some resources. So we had this problem, how to basically make sure that we don't underestimate the needs, but at the same time we avoid double counting. And the approach that we introduced in the methodology is basically a fine-tuning, which is quantifying downward flexibility needs at the transmission and distribution level and reflecting them into the REST integration needs. So on the downward side, we are doing this exercise of fine-tuning. And at the same time, we are also addressing the unavailability of flexible resources due to prequalification and temporary limits at transmission and distribution level, and also reflecting this unavailability at the system level, so through a fine-tuning again of system needs. If you go to the next slide, I think there is an example, a very clear one of how we ensure that there is no basically double counting of needs, because you see at these charts are representing basically the time series of REST curtailment in the different cases. So basically what we do is we first quantify REST curtailment at the system level only. So we have market dispatch results coming maybe from the ERA or a national adequacy assessment. So we are capable of seeing for each hour of the year, of the climate year that we are considering, depending on the target area that we are considering if there was a system level some excess of generation which resulted in curtailment. We are also doing the same exercise at the transmission and distribution network level. So you see that we'll be able, through steps which are very well described in the methodology, to arrive also to time series for these two types of transmission and distribution network needs, which result in rest curtailment. And what we do is basically we reflect everything back into the system level by considering for each hour of the year for the 3 time series the maximum value between among these 3 different type of needs, so that we are sure that we are not double counting basically our needs and then our resources. We take the maximum and we quantify system needs based on this aggregated, let's say, or merged more than other time series of rest curtailment. So this is the approach that allows to, in the one sense, avoid any underestimation of the needs, because we take into account correctly transmission and distribution network level as well, but at the same time avoid any double counting. And then to conclude a bit, we move to guiding criteria, and I think first is for the DSOs. Hubert?
Yeah. Yes, guiding criteria indeed is how we will cover our flexibility needs. What kind of source of data do we need? The finest source of data in terms of location and time and duration and all kinds of attributes you can remove is the market information we will provide when procuring services. So the main source of data for guiding criteria, which is technology neutral, which gives the best location of resources, because indeed at some point a market participant needs to sit their resources, is the market information. So we provided a list of criteria of technical indicators, and this for anyone who wants to make some statistics. Let's say if I want to recruit assets of such and such size, how much can I get? Well, we believe it is easier for them to get the raw data, which is already published, and assess them in any way they can use to see what kind of services they can provide based on their resources. On the other hand, we do not use the aggregated national value. We believe it will not make any more data. It will just blur this finest data. So for guiding criteria for DSOs, the best accurate data, and actually the most valuable data, is the one for market information published when we want to procure local services, which can also provide an outlook on future needs. I'll hand it over to you, Mario.
And if you move to the TSOs, I mean, it's again a joint approach also in this case, but again, the guiding criteria are basically providing additional information which might be used by policymaker to take a decision on technologies that can cover the needs. So we are quantifying the needs. So we are not providing directly the technologies, but we want to be actionable as much as possible and provide as much as possible very useful information to the policymakers. That's why what we do for all the different type of system and network needs is, first of all, to provide what we call sub-indicators, clarifying a bit some technical requirements which are associated to the quantified needs. An example, if we are observing ramping needs for a few hours in a row, this means that we need a certain type of technology to cover the specific need. If, on the contrary, this is occurring just once in a while, after once in a month, for example, a very high peak, we might need a different type of technology to cover the specific need. So first, we characterize our needs, which are in most cases provided in the form of time series, as you saw in the previous examples, providing a bit more characterization in terms of trends that we observe for frequency, volumes, and duration. And then you see an example here for the rest integration need. We also provide additional information of what is the contribution of different technologies, which we model it in a very technology neutral way to reduce, for example, the rest curtailment. So you see here in the chart on the left that for technologies capable of basically providing rest integration contribution with different energy to power ratio, 4 hours, 8 hours, 20 hours, 50 hours, they contribute differently to the mitigation risk curtailment. So you see that the technology that is 4 hours energy to power ratio, it's faster up to a certain point to contribute to reducing the risk curtailment up to a certain point, because at a certain point, you see, when we, if the aim is to bring to zero the risk curtailment, at a certain point, the next technology will become more efficient in doing this risk curtailment reduction. So basically, by providing additional information and characterization from a technical perspective on the results of our REST integration needs, we are also providing some hierarchy for technologies to cover the needs. And this approach, with that we keep technical within the framework of the flexibility needs assessment, could be extended also with cost information, CAPEX and OPEX, beyond the scope of the flexibility needs assessment, to provide even more informed data to the policymaker for taking decision on the targets for the resources to be included in the national energy and climate plans. And I think we close with guiding criteria. Next one is market barriers. Hubert, not sure if you want to say something.
Yeah, just as you know, the national report shall also provide for the designated entity or NRA responsible for the report to analyze market barriers and contribution of digitization. So we provided some input so that maybe those analyses could be standardized, somehow standardized European-wide. And these are the list of topics for market barriers assessment and digitization. So yeah, what kind of requirement to provide balancing services? Likewise, what kind of requirement to provide congestion management? Is it possible for small actors to enter the market? Are aggregation models implemented, for example? What are the network charges for active customers? And what are already the incentives to provide flexibility? So those are the 5 topics that we believe should be useful to provide input into market barriers and contribution of digitalization. We provided it in Annex because we are only to rule the task of DSOs and TSOs, but we believe this could be make a European-wide uniform framework. With this, I think it's I believe with Mario we try to explain what is the methodology about, and I think now it's time for question and answers.
Thank you very much. I also would like to extend my thanks both for this excellent, very comprehensive presentations today, and also for your efforts and commitment during the very intensive discussion and drafting process over the almost past 1 year period. And now I think we can give the floor to our participants for their questions.
Maybe you can display the questions.
Yes. Just give me a second for this. As we announced, we will look at the Q&A section.
Excellent.
And yeah. Okay. I will start in order, and in case that if we run out of time and we will not be able to answer today, we will make sure that we will respond to the remaining ones in writing. I will start with the first question. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question regarding the calculation of residual load for electricity demand. How do you count for consumption from storage? Is it included in the demand? Additionally, how are demand response mechanisms considered? Is the electricity demand assessed before activation of demand response? For variable generation, renewable generation, do you count for curtailed generation in the renewable generation time series?
Yeah, I'll try to answer this, although it's a bit complicated, so I'll try to be quick, but of course we can further discuss. This very much depends also on the type of approach which is used for the quantification, especially for the RES integration need. Because you probably saw the slide in which I was describing the three different approaches. You can start from the ERA, from the national adequacy assessment, or you can run a separate economic dispatch simulation. So it's obvious that the possibility to run a separate economic dispatch simulation was exactly introduced to facilitate this quantification of the RES integration needs and also the modeling of different technologies. Why so? Because the starting point is an economic dispatch simulation in any case. So in the economic dispatch simulation, that is the one of the ERA of the national adequacy assessment as a starting point, you have the opportunity to model all the different technologies for flexibility, including demand-side response, but also storage. And this is the stored capacity of demand-side response storage, which is also the one used in the ERA, in the adequacy assessment, post-economic viability assessment. So you already have the modeling of these resources, which are expected to be present and existing for the time horizon which you run in the assessment, correctly, basically working to integrate renewables already. And you are focusing on what is left with respect to this. So with respect to the use of existing technologies, you are trying to quantify what is the extra resources with the technology neutral approach to achieve your RES integration target. So to answer the first question, the consumption, not sure if for consumption you mean the losses, but if for in general the question is about the use of storage and demand side response, yes, so this is correctly modeled. And if you opt, on the contrary, for the use of the results, the market dispatch output of the ERA or adequacy assessment, so you are not opting for a separate economic dispatch, yes, you need to take into account the contribution of demand-side response and storage and existing flexible technologies in the quantification of residual load. So this is, I think, answering the first question, but again, it's a bit complex, so we can discuss maybe separately on this. And the second one, variable renewable generation, do you account for curtailed generation in the renewable generation time series? Yes, of course, meaning that the renewable generation time series is really the RES curtailment time series. So it's the energy that, as a result of the market dispatch, is curtailed, because basically there was no use, considering the existing technologies, no use of these technologies to integrate this energy that is forcibly curtailed as a result of the market dispatch.
Thank you, Mario.
Hopefully replies, but again, it's a bit complex. Go to the next one.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive explanation on this also. The next one is from Paolo. RES curtailment due to transmission network needs, formerly known as congestions, can be solved by flexible sources at both sides of congestion or by installing new transmission assets or repowering existing ones. How is the transmission expansion planning by each TSO internalized in the TSO network flexibility needs within the FNA?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and thanks for this. First of all, maybe something that we didn't clarify specifically in the presentation. The starting point for the flexibility needs assessment, as I mentioned, is the ERA or National Adequacy Assessment reference condition, which is a post-economic viability assessment condition, considering the scenarios which are the ones used in the ERA. So typically, this is for the ones knowing a bit about ENTSO-E, the national trend, which is aligned with the policy information which are developed at national level. These also include the expected development of the network by the time horizon in which you're running the assessment. So basically, all the projects which are expected to be developed For example, by 2030, if we consider 2030 as the target year for the assessment of flexibility needs, will be included. So you will see them basically in the net transfer capacity with other countries, for example. So if you are expecting the interconnection to be built in 2027, for example, this will be present in our reference condition. So this will be accounted basically in the quantification of flexibility needs. So it will be present, so it will contribute to integrating renewables, and if anything is left, this will result in flexibility needs. Of course, we will not take into account in the flexibility needs assessment any project which is studied in the transmission network development plan. And I'm talking for the TSOs, of course, but I leave the floor to Hubert for the DSOs. So we won't be able to consider whatever will be developed after the time horizon that we are assessing. Basically, also because we are not sure it will be developed, although it's present in the TUNDP or in the network development plan, is still at the level of a study, so it's not under construction. So of course we cannot consider it developed, but the policymaker, when drafting, of course, targets for demonstrated response storage, will have the results of the flexibility needs assessment, potentially the TUNDP, and we take a decision on this.
Thank you, Mario. Hubert, would you also like to say something regarding the DSO side?
Yeah,
Contributing.
on DSO, as you know, the NDP, Network Development Plan, is both to assess the best reinforcements and the best combination actually of reinforcement and flexibility. So we have the scenario of connecting customers, new connecting customers, maybe the increase of loads in customers and so forth. We have scenarios for consumptions. We have scenarios for generation. We plan our network on the long term, and we plan reinforcements coming on the network at certain years. And that's so, in other words, yeah, we do plan that if we plan that a reinforcement will be built in 5 years, what occurs between years 5 and 10, we'll consider that a reinforcement is made by year 5, even though it is not done now. That's the goal of network development plan. When do we need the reinforcements? And for each year, we consider that the reinforcement that should be done before are in service. That's how we assess the future reinforcements. And each time we challenge flexibility and reinforcements and other means.
Thank you very much. Going to the next question. Luis Nieto, getting into the process of flexibility needs quantification, what is the transparency approach on the data? Does the FNA include transparency goals on the needs, or it will be left to the national regulators?
I don't know exactly what transparency goals on the needs means specifically. But in general, there is a provision for the TSOs and DSOs at national level to provide data and analysis to the designated entity at the national authority. And basically, as you saw in the presentation, most of this data is coming from well-known studies and processes, which are either the ERA, the National Adequacy Assessment, or the NDPs for what concern the DSOs. So in most cases, this is data which is already available. For the ERA, the data are published and are available on the dedicated ENTSO-E website, for example. For what concern the results, so the needs themselves, so technically it's on the designated entity to provide, of course, and adopt the final report, which include the results of the analysis carried out by TSOs and DSOs. And there is, of course, a process for making sure at least the TSOs and DSOs overlook, the results to make sure there is no error and, everything is provided and used. But ultimately, this should be provided in the report, which is a public one. So it should be available.
Yep. Again, we cannot define the tasks of the national entity, but table 2, for example, of DSOs they will be made public as well as provided to the national entity.
Thank you again for your contributions to the answers. And the next question is, are the ramping needs and risk curtailment assessed using the same tool? I think, Mario, this is for you.
Also here, I go back a bit, to the answer to the first question we received, because if the TSO is opting for a separate economic dispatch, so it's basically running a new market dispatch simulation with any tool which can do this. I mean, more or less, there are many tools, but are all based on the same, let's say, set of instructions. So they all act the same, more or less. You can basically model also the technical constraints of generation and flexible units in this market dispatch simulation. So you will be addressing ramping needs and curtailment using the same tool of the same market dispatch simulation. On the contrary, if you are relying on a processing of ERA or national adequacy assessment result, you do this exercise individually. So you, on the one side, quantify the ramping needs, let's say, considering the technical constraints of generation units, which were not considered in the corresponding ERA or adequacy market dispatch result. And then you quantify the rest integration need. So it's more a post-processing. There's no tool involved in the case, unless, of course, you want to introduce some nice scripts to facilitate your work, but there's no specific tool because you are relying on the output of market dispatch carried out in other studies.
Thank you, Mario. Next question from Ola is a bit longer one for clarification of the provisions in the methodology. The methodology contains the following sentence: recognizing the relevance of flexibility needs may vary by member states, and with the aim of complementing the analysis of the needs included in the FNA methodology to take into account more specific national conditions, TSOs and DSOs within each member state have the discretion to consider additional aspects of such needs, for example, investigating as part of the renewable energy resources integration needs the prolonged periods of shortage. Could you please explain this sentence and what it could mean for a member state? I think this is also for you, Mario.
Yeah, no problem. And I think this is basically a reference to a whereas. Don't remember exactly which one, but we included this sentence in a whereas. So I'll explain this. Basically, the flexibility needs assessment methodology focuses only on the needs that we defined in article, I think it was 5 or 6. Okay, so the 3 type of different system needs, and then the transmission and distribution network flexibility needs. But at the same time, you recognize that there could be aspects of these needs that might require further investigation at national level. So you'll see that the methodology is providing a lot of different requirements, which represent a minimum set of requirements in terms of scenarios to be considered, in terms of target year to be considered, and also in terms of what is of each need that we want to quantify. But this doesn't mean that the TSOs and DSOs at national level cannot run sensitivities, for example, or address some specific condition of the system. So this whereas is basically stating this. Look, there is a certain set of default, let's say, analysis that you have to carry out, but at the same time, there is also other aspects of the needs that we included in the methodology, so no additional ones, but for the needs that we included, you can also address some specific conditions. And one of these conditions that we use as an example is these periods of variable renewable shortage, so what are commonly known as Duncan-Flaute events, which are included and addressed as part of the RES integration needs. But if the TSOs is interested in this particular aspect, so you want to analyze, for example, and characterize even more the time series of wind and solar generation for the specific condition, of course, it's possible to do so. So for a member state, let's say there's no obligation to do this. There is just an obligation, let's say, for the TSOs and the DSOs by month 3 to indicate to the designated entity and the national regulatory authority what is the set of analysis at the end it will do beyond the ones which are mandatory.
Thank you very much, Mario, for the clarification. I think it is already satisfactory. Thank you, and also for confirming from our participants. The last question, I think, if I understood correctly, if a TSO is designated to draft the FNA in a member state, the TSO has to finish the data and analysis within 10 months, and the NRA of that member state has to approve the FNA on 16 July 2026. I think here we need some clarification on national implementation. There's a bit of misunderstanding, looks like. Who would like to reply on this?
I can also reply, but just because it's the TSO. In reality, it's a bit different than this, because first of all, a clarification on the process itself. The validation time by the NRA is not specified within the 12-month framework. There is a provision that we included in the methodology that basically says that by month 3, all the timing, also the one of the validations, should be defined. So basically, within the first 3 months, we expect all the actors which are involved somehow at different degrees into the drafting of the report or the approval of the report to sit together at the same table, basically, and define not only technical aspect but also timing. So within 3 months, we will know how many weeks or months the NRA will take, for example, to approve the methodology. But as Hubert was anticipating, we were not able within the methodology to rule basically the responsibilities of other entities beyond the TSOs and the DSOs. So it was not possible for us to write, this will be done by whatever number of months. So we could only suggest sort of agreement among all the entities to define this program. So basically, the validation will come in any case after the 12 months. This means that if the TSOs is chosen as a designated entity, technically it will have the whole 12 months to finalize and adopt the report, which basically means by month 10, all the interactions with the DSOs should be completed. And then the TSOs will have 2 months to finalize and adopt the report, which will be then approved by the NRA. Okay, so that's the exception, because normally if the designated entity is not the TSO, both TSOs and DSOs have to finish everything by month 10 and then give to the designated entity to adopt the report. So if it is the TSO, technically all the analysis should be completed in any case by month 10, but then the TSO has this role to finalize the report and adopt it.
Yeah, just to supplement that answer, until month 10, transmission system operators and distribution system operators provide their data analysis with respect to system needs and network needs, regardless whether TSO is or not the designated entity. Then the designated entity has 2 months to compile this data, be it TSO having another hat and doing that task, or being the NRA. It doesn't change. It's just like there is another role which may fall on TSO, it may fall on another entity, it may fall on the NRA, and the regulation itself does not provide any timeline for the NRA to approve the report. It's just silent. So not only we cannot in this methodology rule the NRA, but furthermore, there is no timeline in the regulation on the schedule for the NRA to approve the report and send it to ESA. That's also, so that's why it doesn't change so much the timeline for the designated entity to draft the report, whether it's whether it's a transmission system operator or the designated entity. It's another role if TSOs has it, in addition.
Yeah, and of course, this is our DSO and ENTSO-E proposal, DSO entity and ENTSO-E proposal.
Thank you very much. We have finalized our time, but we have a bit of more questions. Especially, I identified some questions regarding DSOs. Maybe we can quickly answer on this, and one maybe it might be important. And if we will not be able to answer the rest, we will provide the answer in a written form. If it works for you, there are two questions we can answer at once. In what practical ways are DSOs integrating flexibility needs into their development plans? And is there any calendar describing when each DSO will provide these development plans? There are two questions.
Okay. There is no calendar in this methodology to time network development plan. Network development plan are in the regulation in a directive since 2099. Network code on demand response is further regulating it. So in other words, a network development plan consistent with NCDR can only be made once NCDR is approved. So that's probably one thing. When should DSOs provide the network development plan? Many DSOs have already anticipated and make network development plan and publish them. Then the other question was, how do they organize? That was a question, Metap?
Yes, it was. In what practical ways DSOs integrating flexibility needs into their development plans?
The methods that describe how flexibility is taken care in the network planning is in each network development plan, because indeed flexibility is at the end of the day one more tool in operations. It's activated most of the time in real time, and the planning methods, the asset management method, the operational methods, even the human resource methods, can you dispatch workers off night, how long, and so forth, is depends on the country. Whether you have a rural network, an urban network, whether your network is highly digitalized or not, or for many different types of reasons, all these policies depend and are optimized by each DSOs to deliver the requirements that are given by them by the regulation. And it is their responsibility to make the best solution to fulfill their requirement. And flexibility is just one piece of that big puzzle. So in each network development plan, you will find how that DSO is embedding flexibility in its, I would say, industrial structure. So the method to define flexibility is in each network development plan. And this methodology takes those results as input and then compiles it in a national report. So that's the method itself used by each DSO is in each network development plan, which is published.
Thank you, Hubert. Maybe lastly, we can take the question regarding the capacity remuneration mechanisms. Mario, just for clarification, the starting point of FNA is the area scenario after the EVA, right? In this case, if a CRM is implemented in a member state, the generation not viable after EVA, but which stays thanks to the CRM, should be also considered, right?
Yes, the answer is yes. So basically, it's the same concept, of the development plans. So whatever is expected to be realized or present by the time horizon for which we are running the assessment. So this also includes CRMs because these are technologies which will be realized on time for for the given time horizon because they have a CRM behind them. They will be considered as an input to the assessment.
Yeah. Thank you, Mario. We are already running out of our time. I would like to close our session now, but for the remaining questions, we will come back to you in via email or written format. And for any kind of further information requests or questions, you can always reach out the associations. And thank you very much for your time and patience. And we hope to continue our close cooperation with Acer throughout the next steps. And we believe that this methodology represents a significant step forward in addressing the flexibility needs of the grid and unlocking access to necessary flexibility resources for system operators and integration of renewables as well. Thanks again, and have a good rest of the day.
I think Arthur raised his hand. I'm not sure if Arthur wants to say something. No,
I didn't recognize. Sorry.
Acer? No. Okay. No.
If so, yes, we will be happy for this.
Okay.
But I think
it was a mistake. Yeah.
It was a mistake.
No
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you very much again, and have a good day
Thank
to
you.
all participants.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.